Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
I know you can't get enough of short-term rental content, so we're at it again. My guest is Taylor Jones, the head of acquisition for STR Search. We're going to talk about how to never buy an unprofitable short-term rental. We're going to talk about all the data that he looks at, how he got into it, what he looks for. And it's another deep dive because short-term rentals are becoming more popular, but you need to understand the regulations and what to look for and if this asset class is for you. Let's go. This is episode 169 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Taylor Jones. Taylor is the head of acquisition at STR Search. And if you don't know by now, STR stands for short-term rental, and the head of acquisition at Techvestor. He is knee-deep in short-term rentals. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the intro.
Yeah, because we were just talking before, and you are in this asset class very deep, right?
Yes, absolutely. Eat, breathe, and sleep it at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important. We can start with niches because, asset classes are so wide and variegated. How did you end up in the short-term rental space?
Yeah, so it was actually a lifelong sales guy chasing commission. So that was kind of how things started after college. 8 different sales jobs, always just, like I said, just chasing commission.
Get the better commissions, yeah.
Exactly. Chase the ladder. Didn't matter what I was selling. COVID hit, had a client-facing sales job. So the only way to make money was to secure new contracts from clients. And they kind of shut down the world in March of 2020. So wasn't fired, but wasn't allowed to go sign new commissions. And so it's kind of oh man, this is
the well's dry.
Yeah, this is not a great spot to be in. But fortunately, I had all the time in the world and had always had a niche for real estate. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I got to kind of explore just about everything. I looked at BRRRR, I looked at multifamily, I looked at Section 8. Do I want to be a broker? Do I want to flip? And naturally kind of stumbled onto short-term rentals. Now, I wish that I had looked sooner because me and my wife, we've actually been consumers of Airbnb since 2015. So it wasn't like it was new to look at this. I've been on one side of the equation. I just never looked at the unit economics of being a host.
Yeah.
Obviously, I wish I'd done that in 2015 and be a heck of an opportunity.
Yeah.
But, started diving in, consuming, YouTube videos, bigger pockets, reading books, articles, etc., and just decided to start writing offers. I'm one of those, you got to take action. There's too many analysis paralysis that goes on and people just never do. So 5th offer we wrote, we got accepted to buy a cabin 8 hours away, sight unseen, in a completely different state as I'm here in Florida. Yeah. And there is obviously no mountains or no cabins. So flew up to Atlanta, drove an hour and a half to the Blue Ridge Mountains, put in a bunch of sweat equity, decided, okay, overhaul the game room, new furniture, add in a fire pit, the hot tub, everything. Remember when we came back and eventually the sales job came back naturally. We got to go talk to each other face to face again. Yeah. I launched it on a Tuesday night, I remember, and I woke up the next morning and had 5 bookings for over $8,000, and I was addicted. I was like, okay, this is something else, and so that was kind of the pivot that really changed things.
But at the time, how did you know how to go experience level? I think there's so much content out there right now that shows experiences are what winning, or what is winning at STR, even though, of course, there was this, fake STR decline, thing for 2 years. But how did you know to kind of go bigger, work on a game room and these amenities at that time?
So I definitely wasn't as data versed as I am now. I kind of just went off of me as a consumer. So a lot of us Floridians, if you drive north, the first mountain range you're going to hit is the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I traveled there and I was like, well, I like visiting here. I'm sure other people like visiting here. And if I'm hanging out at the cabin, I was like, I like cool stuff to do, air hockey, cards, pool table, etc. I like making s'mores around the fire pit. I'll put in a fire pit like, oh, it gets cold. I should have a hot tub. So it was a lot of just practicality, which did work out. Like, it definitely, there was not a ton of data backing or research, but I really just played off of like me as a consumer. Where do I like to go travel?
Right.
What do I like to do? Well, I'm sure I'm probably not a weirdo and there's other people who like the same exact thing. So let me just go that way. Now, obviously, I haven't taken that approach since, but it did make logical sense and it worked out that way as well. So that's kind of where, the thought process came in on that very first deal.
Yeah, I talk a lot about like your ideal avatar as an STR host. And I think you designed the first avatar after yourself because you knew, hey, look, at least I know some people like me are going to want this exact thing. I think that's a really safe play to go on the first, as long as you've been a consumer of short-term rentals. I think if someone has, I've stayed in them my whole life because I don't like hotels. So I think the same. I kind of know, wow, those places I like, the ones that are clean, and have the stuff that I need, but don't have, a cabinet full of 18 spices from the last 50 guests. Like I feel weird touching those. But that's a kind of good entryway for people who are new to trust themselves a little as long as they've been using that space. Do you feel like that's good advice for someone now in today's market?
Yeah. I mean, market selection, I think is the biggest hurdle for people. It's like, where should I buy? And when people ask me that, sure, I have arguably some of the best data access in this asset class, and we can get into that. But to me, what I tell people is if you're limited on time or resources, start with all the places that you like traveling and start underwriting deals that way, because everything's going to boil down to how much does the real estate cost and how much revenue can you make? So like easy filtration there. If prices are high and revenues are low, you're not going to make any money. Cross that place off your list. But if you find a little bit of spread, then you can start data diving deeper. So to me, I would just start with where you like traveling with your spouse, your family, whatever situation you're in. Just start there and go through those markets first as kind of a benchmark. Maybe you live near a vacation market. I grew up in Orlando, which is near one of the meccas in Disney.
Yeah.
It would be absolutely horrific to go into that market as one of the most populated markets in the country.
I agree.
You can at least start somewhere. Maybe you live in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, or Tupelo, Mississippi, and you're not exactly in a vacation market, so you have to go elsewhere. But start with what's close and start with where you like going. And I think those are good benchmarks from a data diving and underwriting perspective to see, do deals pencil in these vacation markets that I personally travel to?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I grew up staying in short-term rentals, and I grew up doing them because we didn't really know what it was. There was no Airbnb. We had them on HomeAway and Vrbo, but basically we would, buy places where we like to go. We considered it, well, now we have a free vacation home and it also makes money. To me, that's the kind of win of short-term rentals. I get it when people are operating as a full-on business, they have 20 and they never stay there, but I like to stay in the places. I like to own places that I want to go to because then I feel like I have a free vacation. Does that fit into that philosophy as well? Because that just seems like a nice perk of doing short-term rentals.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely started that way. Hence, buying in the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was great to escape. The problem I ran into is when you start setting up really good places is it was never freaking vacant. So
I know.
The problem
you have to block it like 7 months in advance and just lock down like the bad times.
Well, yeah. And that's what's tough is like January, February. It's actually pretty nice here in Florida, but there's no skiing in Blue Ridge. So the problem is you're kind of freezing your butt off and you don't get the benefit of the cold, which is snowing and skiing. So it was kind of one of those like, well, January, February is my slow time. I don't really want to go there. And I hated blocking the fall, the leaves changing. Trust me, there ain't no leaves changing in Florida.
Yeah.
But it's also hard to kind of click the block button when you're seeing 500, 600, 700 a night peak rates. And I'm like, oh boy, this is getting dicey here. So after a while, I just am not going. And now I've kind of pivoted to, I just invest for yield, and I'm going to take that yield. And guess what? I can block any other cabin in Blue Ridge if I want to go visit in the fall, or I can go to any skiing destination in January, February. So I've pivoted over time on my investing journey from buying for pleasure to just buying for straight yield. But that's, everybody pivots and changes on their investing journey, and you're ultimately going to pursue what, you think is the best decision for you and your family.
Yeah, but that's really good seasonal advice because I just got back from Asheville like 2 days ago, and I'm looking at one there to knock, and we had the same discussion. I was like, well, I can use it. And she's like, well, you want to use it in the months when other people don't want to use it. I'm like, that's okay with me. I live in New Jersey, so my weather will be better in the winter there when people don't want to be there. But she said, like, yeah, don't, when the leaves are out, like, you don't come. You're not getting in. Because as you said, though, I think at least you can make that comparison. You can look at the pricing data and see, okay, I can take $500 a night or I can lose $500 a night and take the enjoyment. At least you have something to weigh on the scale, and the data now, which I never had when I was younger doing this, really makes it easy to at least make an informed decision like you made and say like, hey, well, okay, well, let's go business on these. And as you said, might just go stay in somebody else's, in a different spot. And that's really good advice. And I think that's a modern consumerism at its best, because you have options to decide for yourself.
Yeah, no, and it's really great to just kind of look at the full picture. And when you see things on a side-by-side basis, I think it becomes really simple and practical to execute on. And you just have to boil everything down to the simplest terms, and you can make a really informed decision at that point.
Yeah, when you started getting more, are you focused on the same areas, or are you spread out, and what do you recommend to other people who come to you for help? Because I like clustering as an idea, especially with short term, because you want to get your cleaners working as much as possible if you don't know any other STR operators in the area. What's your take on proximity for as you increase a portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, it's the age-old debate. Do you want density or diversification? So the two Ds that weigh, and both have pros and cons. I've personally done diversification on a personal level, but I also, have some pretty good resources to tap into. So I think, I'm confident going into any new market and building out the Rolodex. It is a pain in the butt. So, deal number 2 is quite easier than deal number 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm just chasing the yield. So wherever the yield falls, if it happens to be in the same area, great. Eventually Blue Ridge ran dry, so it didn't make sense to continue to double down there anyway. But yeah, I mean, if I was already in a market and the numbers were great, then sure, would keep doubling down. But yeah, I mean, I think on a personal level, it's like, do you want to balance seasonality, have coastal mixed with mountain, mixed with lake, mixed with urban?
Yeah.
Do you only want to be, investing in city center, appeal to nurses? Like, you got to just look at what's your strategy. That's where I think it all boils back down to is, what's your investing strategy and what are you looking to get? Because that's also going to determine whether density or diversification is going to make sense for you. But those are the two things that everybody's going to do. And I have the 2Ds, pros and cons discussion with a lot of investors, because once you get one, it doesn't matter. But the discussion at 2 is, okay, are we going to go for density or diversification? Right. So
yeah, no, I think that's a great discussion to have, because then they are thinking ahead, like, okay, this market's saturated. I really like this one, but after this, I'm not going to be able to get another one here. So you really have to plan that strategy, knowing like your access to another one is going to be more expensive, than this one. What's your take though for new investors getting into the short-term space? I feel like a lot of people still think in some crazy world that this is passive real estate investing, when of course it's not. How do you get people adjusted to the management aspect of short-term rentals? Because some people think maybe it's going to be easy, but one bad review in the beginning can basically ruin your entire listing.
Yeah, I mean, despite what your favorite guru has told you on TikTok or Instagram, this is far from passive. I would even say there's a reason the IRS classifies this as active income with material participation. Yeah. So if the government is classifying it that way, that should kind of be the first red flag, because they also, designate what is considered passive investing in the IRS code, and short-term rentals does not fall under that breath. So, you can put in systems like any business, and, I would highly recommend having SOPs and systems. Just listing on Airbnb and going through the motions is not a great way to run a business. And those are the people that will struggle. Can you automate parts of this? Absolutely. Can you do? But it is hospitality. And kind of the saying I always say is, you're buying a hospitality business that just so happens to have a piece of real estate attached to it. It is not buying real estate and the other way around. So you are buying a hospitality business that, oh, by the way, over here is dangling a piece of real estate that's just attached to it for fun. So you can't look at this as a real estate first approach, because it's not. You do get the benefits of real estate, but it is a hospitality business and operations business at its core. All the money is made on the operations side anyway. I mean, we've seen, similar property, similar market, same street, and you could see 50% swings in revenue. Yeah. So this is an operations business, and, nobody can tell you otherwise.
Yeah, I feel like when everyone was talking STR demise, they were talking about those kind of old school Airbnb landlords who just set it and forget it, still have old pictures, don't really worry about the experience much, focused on the mountain. But then a lot of new people came in and, put in, pickleball courts, and they're like, well, no one's coming to my place anymore. And they still didn't adjust. And that's why I think you see a lot of these, seller financing STR deals out there. At least I see them on Instagram a lot, because people they don't know what to do to keep up, and they don't want to spend more money. Do you think that the market has really become not just, of course, hospitality based, but like very experiential? Like this is what people are looking for. If they're going to pay a lot, there better be cool stuff.
Yeah, it's design and amenities at this point. So A+ location can carry you to an extent. Yeah. It will run dry, but it's design and amenities at this point, and that's the game. And so you have to differentiate through really good design and really good amenities. If you can mix that in with A+ location, you just have a grand slam. But location to an extent without room for great design or great amenities will also only carry you so far. So we've kind of taken hey, we still want to be in a good location, but it doesn't have to be A+, but we're just going to out design and out amenitize everybody else. And that's kind of been a winning blueprint that we've continued to double down with, as far as that's concerned. Yeah, you can't just list any old property anymore to make money. I think too, it's you have to ignore the headlines and cut through to the data. I've always, really just stayed focused on what are the numbers saying and ignore the headlines. When a lot of the Airbnb bus stuff was coming in, it was the Glendale Super Bowl in Arizona. So Phoenix, Scottsdale, type of thing. And I was like, man, we had 40 plus properties there. They all got booked. We were running 4-figure ADRs for the Super Bowl. Now, all the people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting any bookings, was like, well, you see the property. It's like a 3.2 plain vinyl siding in flyover country isn't getting booked anymore. It's not complicated. You took your photos with your iPhone 8. You have grandma's plaid drapes still up. Of course you didn't get booked for Super Bowl weekend. This isn't shocking to me. So if you were just assuming that the 2020, 2021 rush was going to go on forever, well, that's just delusional. But to me, it's never hard. I've never seen anybody post their link in those Facebook groups complaining about having an empty calendar, where I look at it and would even classify this as even a B+ level property. Everything's B- or less when it comes to the competition. I'm pretty fortunate. I look at 50 to 100 deals a day. So I really get to see, deals across the country and what top performing properties look like across all the markets in the US. So, it's really easy to see when something's good and not good very quickly. And I think people don't step outside their bubble and think is this good? At minimum, you should go look at all the top performers in your market or any market you're going to consider, and go find the top 10%, which is very, very easy. You can use filters and tools such as AirDNA or Rabu. Go into top performers, filter by bedroom count. So if you're gonna buy a 3-bed, I want to know what the best of the best are doing. Where are they located? What amenities do they have? What do those homes look like? How are they designed? How are they set up? And that should be a cue for things to play off of and look at. And those are things I did too. Now, I was fortunate enough to be able to buy my second one in Blue Ridge when we started scaling. And what I started doing is just looking at top performers. And one of the things I did was I was also looking in the Smoky Mountains at the time. And back then, having a movie theater started to become pretty normal. That was on the rise in Gatlinburg. I would kind of say indoor pools is now that equivalent. Now movie theaters are table stakes in the Smokies. But in Blue Ridge, nobody had one. So I'm sitting here with this cabin that had a detached garage, which a garage is generating $0 in revenue for you as a short-term rental. It makes no money. If you leave your garage plain, you just like lighting money on fire is what you're telling me. So a conversion is needed into something. Now, we already had the basement game room. So a game room, boom, cross that off. That's not going to make sense. So I took and I said, well, if movie theaters are popular in Gatlinburg, another cabin market up the road, why would they not work here? Sure as heck, we converted it, did the raised platform, put the black chairs in, had the neon lights. all of a sudden now we've got one of the top performing 3-bedroom cabins in all of Blue Ridge. And so
that wasn't even a huge spend, right? I mean, it was a smart spend, but not a gigantic one.
No, came in around $8,000. I'm sure today with inflation is probably 10 to 12, but like the ROI there is still paying for itself hand over fist because you have a differentiated product. And now you're starting to see more. I still wouldn't call it table stakes. You could still differentiate with it in that Blue Ridge market, but to me, it's taking what works in another market, a cabin market, or, oh, I own a beach property. Well, what are other cool things in other beach markets? You're not confined with your imagination to just what's going on in Blue Ridge. What are people doing?
That's smart. You want to be the first. Yeah, the first to beat them, like you said. I like what you said. And I was thinking while you were talking about just dynamic pricing in general, because I was thinking about the owners that get left behind, is that dynamic pricing is responsive to bookings and inventory, but owners who don't respond aren't like dynamically aware of what's going on. Like all the advice that you just gave for the last few minutes is know what's around you. Those same people who you said when they send you a thing and they're like, this is like a B plus, right? And you look, it's clearly like a D, just a D property because they have old furniture. They're like, well, that's almost the antithesis of your beginning avatar because they're older now. They were doing it when it was easy. And now they think, but I would stay there. And you're like, yeah, but nobody else would. Like, you're not the current avatar. You're, 70. No, I'm old too. So nothing against someone 70, but you're usually not looking for, like a bull riding station. It's just, maybe putt-putt, but.
Yeah. It's the stat that I think will shock you that, we have a good relationship over at AirDNA. Half of all hosts have 4 or less prices listed in the year. So if you're running dynamic pricing, you should in theory have 365 different prices.
Exactly.
The half of your competition out there has 4 total prices or less. So it's typically a weekday, a weekend, and a couple holidays.
Yeah.
And that's it. Half. So we're roughly sitting at like 1.8 million listings. So almost half your competition just has 4 or less prices on a given year. Freaking nuts when I saw that. It's also where the opportunity to win is. This is not a huge private equity, Starwood, KKR, Blackstone, BlackRock. They're not all in this asset class.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure, they're all chomping at the bit too, but you're competing against, Uncle Bob who took his listing photos with his iPhone 8. Like that's your competition in a lot of markets. And so understanding what your top performers are, what do they have, how can you differentiate? It's just such an easy way to turn around and do it. We took that same strategy. So, I told you the personal example with movie theaters. We go to Scottsdale, Arizona, and, it's a heavy competitive market. You can't miss there. You could still win in that market. You just can't miss. Your margin of error is thinner. And we see all the top performers have pickleball courts. That's now becoming table stakes to be a top performer, not necessarily just to compete, but just to be a top performer. Well, we're like, we wonder if we could take the same strategy and go bring it over to Florida. Nobody else is putting pickleball courts in Florida, but Arizona, Florida, you have to have a pool. So everybody's buying a house with a pool. That's a non-starter.
Brown, it's green. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Grass and rocks and cactus versus, St. Augustine grass, which is a glorified weed. Sure.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, of course, like the market gives you an outstanding premium because you're doing this. So studying all these different markets has given us such an edge to see what wins. And so we'll take winning ideas from market A and bring them to market B and just go with what's similar. Mountain versus mountain, coastal versus coastal. We've even tried hybriding it and thinking, oh, well, nobody in the mountains is putting pickleball courts in. What if we just go really extreme here and see what happens? And so now we're just going cross geography at this point to try to continue to see and push the edge of what's going to win and give you an outsized premium in this asset class.
Yeah, I think it's really smart. I mean, when I'm looking just as a consumer, I don't necessarily need pickleball court, but if I was going with a big group, that would be sweet. And I see that, so when you're looking, this is really important content to get out there. For people who are looking for short-term rentals, I've always said, and a lot of my guests have said, you're looking for places, as you said before, with extra buildings, outbuildings, garages, extra land that's being unused, because that's where you're going to be able to transform the property into whatever it was to what it can be. Do you agree with that?
Everybody has a kitchen, a bathroom, a living room. The reason we never do condos, I'm an anti-condo for a couple reasons, but here's a main one. in theory, if everybody in that building invested in elite design, if everybody hired amazing Airbnb designers, guess what? It becomes a race to the bottom on price, and you're a glorified hotel now at this point. You have no differentiation because you all have living rooms, you all have bedrooms, you all have kitchens, you all have bathrooms. So if you don't have additional spaces to differentiate, you will die. So it's differentiate or die is really what it boils down to. So only do single family homes. I've seen some townhomes where you either have a rooftop can be a differentiating factor, but maybe they're going to give you a small like 10 by 15 yard too. And again, so it's just harder. Having single family home gives you that advantage to have the yard space, the unfinished basement, the family room, living room. Huge mistake is putting 2 sitting areas in there. That is not how you drive revenue. You turn one into an amenity filled area, whether that be pool table, game room, etc. Convert a garage, whatever your opportunity is, unused spaces. You have to treat everything as, how can I drive revenue from this square foot? Because in theory, you're paying for the square footage. It's appraising off of the square footage. If you were building this from scratch, and like that's something I'm looking at is building custom short-term rentals, you literally are paying for every square foot. And so you have to think, is this going to generate revenue? Yes or no? If not, I need to get rid of it, cut it out, or shrink it. So in theory, you're trying to build the smallest, most efficient floor plan possible. I know it says counterintuitive. You build this 5-bedroom. You don't need no 3,000 square foot oversized 5-bedroom. You're wasting space. You want to get the most efficient, doesn't feel cramped 5-bedroom possible, because now I'm spending the least to make the most.
Yeah, I'd much rather have less bunk beds and more amenities because it's less wear and tear also, and you can get the same price, to be honest, because you're going to have better amenities. I think those are really good points. And I think one differentiator for people to think about if they have condos or townhouses that can't keep up, like you said, because they don't have the amenities in an area where single families, those are great pivots to midterm rentals, because midterm, you don't have to go crazy on those. And that's kind of where I think having assets that you can repurpose is smart. Say you have a portfolio of 10 short-term rentals. One is just kind of, sadder. That's a great one to pivot to something else that can make, more than long-term rent, but also, less wear and tear. What do you think about that as a strategy for those type of properties?
Yeah, if you're stuck in that position, I think that's a good pivot. I'm pretty all in. So people are like, oh, do you
see nothing else?
Do you invest? Yeah, do you invest with an LTR as a backup? I mean, in today's day and age, those don't pencil anyway. You also have the most regulation risk, because where those are going to pencil is urban city center. So you have the most risk. So like, without getting too deep into that, that's really like, it's really all in. Like, I don't want to, because if you try to appeal to 2 strategies, you end up not being good at either. Like you're just really, you're only decent at both. I'd rather be all in on short-term rentals and nail it. For me, how I look at that is, if you start building a portfolio of 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is something I've personally done and learned from some very smart people who are just further down the race of life than me, is start trimming the fat and evaluating your own portfolio. So look at your least performing property.
Yeah.
And if you have an ounce of equity in that deal, you start looking at return on equity, so ROE, which once I learned about that metric, like completely changed the game. Because your original return on investment, your cash on cash, whatever metric you're using, is probably freaking great. Like, cool, bought it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. But your return on equity today actually sucks. And so you're better off repurposing those dollars. So I've personally trimmed fat within my own portfolio a couple of times and done 2 1031 exchanges. And it's just taking what's the bottom of your barrel and then trading up. So you're going to get your original down payment back plus any equity growth, and then recycle that into something bigger. And so I sat there and was sitting there in that original first Blue Ridge cabin. Eventually, it didn't have any differentiation. It was just a cabin in the woods. It was nice design, but with a glut of supply, COVID rush, I saw the writing on the wall. Well, I took this Airbnb that was making $82,000 in annual revenue and was like, I found something to buy that's generating $120,000. So I'm going to take that same down payment I put, those same upgrades, plus a little bit of equity growth from holding it for about 2 years, and I'm going to 1031 to something bigger. And you just keep 1031ing up. And, one of these great guys, mentor of mine told me, he's like, you're just going to keep resetting your floor. And, what you see strategically is, I'm not going to touch anything not doing 75K in revenue. I'm not going to touch anything doing 100, 150. Like, as jaded as it is, like, it's going to be hard for me to go touch anything not doing $175 right now at the point of life I am, because to operate an Airbnb, this is what people learn, that does 75K in revenue versus 175, it takes the same amount of work.
Same, yeah. Yeah.
So
That
to
makes
me,
sense.
you just keep trimming the bottom of your portfolio. And so as you build in this asset class, and this is just why I'm just so focused on staying all in elite properties, elite design, elite amenities, is you just keep trading up and trim the portfolio, go for bigger, more robust, more decked out, more premium yield, and just keep trading up, taking advantage of tax benefits along the way, principal pay down, wealth building through real estate, just basic real estate principles as a whole. And you can sit yourself here in the next 5 to 10 years and be in a really good spot. It's not just, oh, I'm accumulating doors. No, you could just build 4 or 5 and just keep recycling those up and growing your yield, which is not something you can really do in, a multifamily per se or long-term rental. So I do love the ability to continue to trade up in this asset class, and you don't have to add doors necessarily.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've always been anti-doors. I usually have no idea how many doors I even own because it's not relevant. If I'm in a syndication, those aren't my doors. I just a little tiny piece of those doors. So that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I really think that can help people kind of justify if you just keep it at 5 doors and you keep upgrading that bottom door to something better, you're just going to keep making more money and being more efficient in the same process. Like you said, I really like what you said that, you're 70,000 income and 170,000, the exact same management style. So as you grow, you want to keep upgrading. I think if you're starting out, you can be careful and maybe you don't have the capital to get into the bigger property. But as you were saying, when you do go to sell those properties, if you've done a good job, even if they're your bottom property and you have the metrics, right now you can make a much better sell with all of your Airbnb data that you're disclosing as a seller for someone who just wants to walk in and try it out. Maybe they don't know any better, but you're giving them all the data. Hey, this is how much it's made the last 3 years. That's a great selling technique that I think few agents really understand when you have to be in the short-term rental space to know how to market it for sale with the data.
Yeah, there's so much discrepancy on listing Airbnbs. It's kind of easy to exploit when you're deep in there, and you see so many people who just don't know what they're doing. So it can definitely give you a huge edge when it comes to selling that property or that asset, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you think has changed though in the asset class? Do you think it's just like more amenities, or do you think that more skilled operators are getting into it? There's so much guru stuff out there. It's very hard, I think, for a regular consumer now who's interested in STR to know, like, I don't know, do these people know anything? There's just like so much content out there. How can someone get through and figure out what's real and if this is a good asset class for them to get into?
Yeah, there's definitely been a professionalization. When people ask me, like, hey, like during COVID, early 2020, they're like, who were you following on YouTube? And I can't even, it's unfortunate because I caught a couple of these people before they actually got big. So I got very fortunate and lucky. And the content they used to put out, pre-courses, pre-education business was actually just focused on short-term rentals. And I learned a lot, cut my teeth there. Unfortunately, now I couldn't in good faith recommend their content or what they're putting out because it's designed to sell an education business.
Yeah, it's commercialized.
Yeah. And that's the tough part. I think to me, you need to try to learn as much as possible. It's why I've also tried to put out a ton of content. Like, I'm not, I don't have a mastermind right now. I don't have something there. We're just helping people. And to me, it's also a rising tide lifts all boats. The more tips and tricks I can share, some people have DM me like, do you give away too much? I'm like, I don't really care, because if somebody has a good time saying it's your place, well, guess what? Then they're probably going to continue to book on the platform. And if they happen to travel to one of the destinations where I hold assets, well, then I like my chances. But if they have a bad experience with you, they're probably not coming back to the platform. And then I have a 0% chance of picking them up and making money. So to me, rising tide lifts all boats. This is a very emerging, asset class, unlike multifamily, which we were talking about.
Yeah.
And, you just want it to continue to grow and mature in the right way. It's definitely maturing before our eyes last 18 months here as we sit with 2023 and 24. And really that separation is just unprofessional hosts and unprofessional property is becoming more professionalized. So yeah, I think it's a combination of more amenities, more design, like the table stakes are raising, but I also think you're just getting more professional operators in the hospitality space, which is what you want. And eventually you continue to see a differentiation, and there's the Motel 6 and there's the Ritz-Carlton for a reason. Like, you just see that separation. And I think everything was very blended in 2019, 2020, 21. And now you're seeing the true separation. And doesn't mean you can't be the Motel 6 and win. There is a strategy in buying affordable short-term rentals and winning. but you can't get stuck in the middle, because now when separation occurs, a middle forms and you just get crushed there.
Yeah. And as you were saying before, I think if you want to get into the space, you need to know that you're running a hospitality business, and you need to be all in on figuring out how you're going to grow this hospitality business. You do have the underlying dirt, but as you were saying in the beginning, the real estate's not the main thing. It's good because it has value and it's tangible, but you're not going to make money just off the real estate. I mean, if you're at the top of a mountain, okay, but you still need to make sure, safety wise, that you're set. Hey, it's Jonathan again. We're on the brief interlude portion where eventually there will be carefully curated partnerships here. But for now, I'm just going through to say hi and give you one tip before we get back to the episode with Taylor Jones. The thing that can really help us is if you just share the episode with your friends. If you're a real estate investor, you probably have a lot of friends who are real estate investors. Hopefully you go to real estate investor meetups, conferences. If you really enjoy this podcast and what we're bringing to the table for the mindful approach to real estate investing, I would personally appreciate it if you just recommend it to your friends. They can take it from there. Let's get back to the show. Have you seen any new trends out there in short-term rentals, like beyond pickleball and amenities, that people are doing that you think are really smart to do as hosts, or either on the property or the way that they're communicating or vetting guests?
Yeah, I mean, the unique stays isn't anything new. That's just always something to, continue to monitor. So it's really interesting to continue to see those things like that, continue to emerge. And I keep getting blown away with all these crazy new unique structures. And
oh yeah,
it was the geodomes, it was the glass, it was the this. And so it's just always fascinating. I've always kind of sat aside and watched and try not to get shiny object syndrome and drift over there myself.
Yeah. I had Christy Wolf on, and she has, 7 or 8, the potato shed and shipwreck house. And I'm like, man, that looks good, but I don't want to do any of that work. And she does all the work herself. So I'm looking at it like, yeah, that's too much for me. But I do have a little shiny object syndrome looking at it. It's cool.
You have to. And I've networked with a couple of those guys. And, I see the numbers and I'm like, gosh, man, 600 square feet generating that much in revenue. Like, what am I doing over here?
Yeah, you just have to carry wood slats up to the top of a mountain on your own because no one will bring them up. But, if that's your thing,
go for it. The other thing I'm seeing is kind of the emergence, and it goes into, it's almost like room service, but it's what kind of specialty upgrades. So whether it's in-cabin massages, whether it is the charcuterie board delivery, different things like that, that I'm seeing as just adding another value. And so if you could continue to add another layer than just amenities, just design, you give that little extra. Food and beverage is always tough and tricky. I think one thing I've explored and, talked to other people on is these bigger 5+ bedrooms. You probably need to run at least 12 to, 16 plus on the occupancy side, but is having, maybe in-unit vending. So food and drink, and it could just be a plain vending machine for heck. And you've got waters, Gatorade, sodas, chips, snacks, granola bars that are kind of right there for people, and, $1 here, $2 there. And I know if you get a big group and you got kids, they're going to want to order all those Doritos, everything like that. And, if it's a couple dudes and they went out, had a couple adult beverages, they're coming back and putting a couple dollars, putting a couple dollars in the machine is nothing when you see it there. So, to me, you look at that and you go, oh man, if now all of a sudden we're adding, another couple $100 per booking in there. And, traditional vending might run 50-60% margins on those things. And you go, okay, cool. Like, 80 bookings a year times an extra $100 in profit to that. And you go, cool, it's an extra $8,000 in profit to the bottom line. So it's just stacking. I don't think there's going to be anything big that's going to emerge, but it's stacking these little things like that. And, taking the, I think it's more when you facilitate the charcuterie delivery, the in-cabin massage. I've seen people applying the, standard 15 to 25% markup on that, for facilitating, which you should. And I think it's just stacking those little wins, which are going to be the continued next phase of growth within the asset class.
Yeah, and I also think that's a good partnership for the locality of where you are because you're working with local people. When there's like a nice gift basket and it's all from stuff from the town, now you've encouraged them to go buy in the town, which is why they're there anyway. But even like you're saying, personal chefs, I've seen those available. I think that's really good because they're in and out. They help the experience. And then again, you have a relationship with somebody locally who maybe can refer more people to you on or off platform. Do you look at Airbnb as a marketing channel? Because someone had said that at some point. I thought it was really great advice because we've all come to kind of turn STR into Airbnb, but Airbnb is just a marketing company for our short-term rentals. I, did HomeAway and Vrbo in the old days. And before that was really just like modified timeshares with realtors. That was short-term rentals like in the 80s. So how do you look at Airbnb as an owner and then also as a consumer?
I mean, it's a mega powerhouse. You can't deny.
You can't not use it. That's just silly. Unless you've already been at it for so long, you can direct book the whole year.
Yeah. I mean, I probably have an interesting take against most people. Some of our, more institutional is we actually run everything on platform. So, when people say, oh yeah, just direct bookings, I can go cut holes in that a million ways to Sundays.
Yeah.
Like, cool, you get a direct bookings. How are you going to drive people there? How are they going to know? You're also trying to compete against people spending billions of dollars. The example I give, if you're going to go order a toy for Christmas for your kid, do you go to Amazon and search for that toy or do you go to Google? So if you're going to look for a cabin in Blue Ridge, Georgia, do you go to Google and type cabin for rent Blue Ridge, or do you go to Airbnb and type in Blue Ridge and then search cabin? So changing consumer behavior is massively expensive. It's one of the most expensive things you can do in business, period. So these companies, Amazon, Airbnb, have spent billions in shaping consumer behavior. And, there's rules to play in the marketplace naturally. So I think you need to understand the rules. They're ever evolving. It can be a pain in the ass, but, a pain in the ass is also setting up, a marketing channel and driving direct bookings. So you really need to understand. But yeah, our typical blueprint is, buy the property, high design, high amenities, and listed on the two big platforms, Vrbo and Airbnb. And there's no booking issues. There's no occupancy issues. There's no revenue issues. When you were talking about making it stand out, the term we use is you got to have a scroll stopper. Yeah. And so for us, when we have beautiful design and beautiful amenities, guess what? People stop, they scroll. When we look at our metrics on clicks and views, we're 3 to 4x the marketplace. And it's because when you have a beautifully attractive product that stands out, people stop and click on it. And that's exactly what we want to do. So you can win on platform. I think, you need to understand how to win and what wins on platform. But that's kind of the strategy we've typically taken right now. Obviously, the unique stays, the yurts, the geodomes, the other stuff, that's going to be a direct booking play, pretty straightforward as far as that's concerned. But if you've got just a 3 or 4 bed in Miami, Austin, et cetera, and sure, it's beautifully designed and sure, you've got a pickleball court, but how are you going to go attract and build that out? I think at one, it's very difficult and not something to do. You got a portfolio of 5. I think it's a different discussion.
Yeah. And I just like in terms of just vetting, at least you can see now so many people are staying in so many Airbnbs. If a guest comes in and they have 30 reviews, like you're in good shape, like you're ready to go. I'm not a big advocate of direct booking because I've just had so many bad experiences in my life. What's your take on direct booking, or is it property specific?
Yeah, I think it's more property specific for sure. I tend to lean more on the OTAs. Again, you got the guest filtration. I've always asked questions and required people. There's little things like not taking one night bookings is going to cut down on parties significantly. Last I checked, people throwing a rager don't like paying extra money. They want to pay bare bones.
Yeah.
And when you're priced at top of market, again, you just don't typically attract that kind of clientele. When you have a plain 3-2 vinyl siding home in flyover country with no differentiated factors, you kind of open yourself up to that because again, you're having to give it away for $99 a night. You could open yourself up to things like that. When guests are booking, I always try to ask questions, what's bringing you to the area and what are you looking for, all these things. And so, people who are having ulterior motives aren't typically going to engage with that. And so to me that, you could flag that as a reason not to accept the booking. Whereas if you engage and you are friendly, most people who are good guests are going to continue to engage, talk about their exciting trip because they are excited to come with their family, spouse, group of friends, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's good. That's a secondary vetting. I mean, I think it's always important to make sure you know who's coming in, because if you do get a big portfolio, you may be a little bit more checked out and you're just running a lot of bookings and you miss that one night booking, which is clearly a party stay. Who wants a one night just stay in a hotel? It's not big enough to have a party. Okay. Now I'm starting to get it. But these are things to watch out for. Are there any other things for people who are just, they have their first or their second that you say they should look out for now, except, other than obviously regulations coming your way? If I saw regulations, even in some minutes of a community meeting, I'd be sliding that property to the bottom and trying to beat the curve on getting rid of it, because there are a lot of areas that are trending in that direction.
Yeah. In the regulation topic, I just look for established regulations.
Yeah.
Typically, and I'm taking California out of it, it's its own animal. So, when I say these things, when I say these things, it doesn't count to the Californias, the Hawaiis of the world. But, typically when there's established regulations, there's just maybe changes, but it's little nuances. And you've seen 9 times out of 10, there's grandfathering.
Yeah.
What you're seeing the headlines on is there was really no rules in place, and now they put rules in.
Yeah, exactly.
So, whether it's the Dallas stuff or some of the others, it wasn't that it was legal before and they said, yeah, they're allowed and now they're illegal. that you're not seeing a whole lot of. What you're seeing is a place that didn't have any set regulations or boundaries, and they're just putting in the border of the sandbox. I just want to know what the rules are. Like, tell me where the box is and I'll just hang out in the box.
Yeah.
But when there's no set box, that's where you could get in trouble. Second little hedge is the government taxing it. Just like tobacco, marijuana, alcohol, as soon as the government starts getting their hands on it, making tens of millions, they don't typically reverse course. I haven't seen, the government come in and, state of Colorado being like, hey, you know what? Weed's illegal. We don't like making hundreds of millions here anymore. You don't see that. So if the government's putting a 4, 5, 6, 7% tax on short-term rentals, guess what? They're not getting rid of it, because the millions they are going to suck out from that, it's just common sense investing, in my opinion. So it's kind of that 2-layer approach of established sandbox, established rules, and then is the government taxing it via lodging taxes, booking taxes, et cetera, some form or some shape of that. It's going to be a pretty solid indicator that it ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I like your point that it's really just areas creating regulations, which is smart. Everybody's talking about NIMBYs and YIMBYs now for not in my backyard or yes in my backyard. But I think a lot of it is a product of what you said. Well, now they've just established regulations. So now the two sides are going to come argue about it. Hey, I live next to a short-term rental. I don't want that. And then the other, 5 people who have short-term rentals are like, well, we're not bothering anyone. Like we're doing well. If you do buy in a residential area, are you making contact with the neighbors just to let them know, hey, I'm doing short-term rentals. We're going to be good. We're not like bad hosts, because those are the NIMBYs that I think cause people problems. You just kind of spring it on them in a random residential neighborhood.
Yeah, I think being proactive, I think, is always a better approach than, having them reach out to you if there's an issue. You can get in front of so many different things, so that those things just help a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome, man. Well, it's been a pleasure. Where's the best place for people to find you? I think from your that's you on Instagram. It's Mr. Jones STRs, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not as deep on Instagram, but that is where to find me now on
LinkedIn.
Twitter.
Twitter.
Yeah. Twitter. Well, I made my cut up on Twitter, or now not formerly Twitter, now X.
Yeah.
So I am at Mr. Jones STRs on Twitter, or X. Taylor Jones on LinkedIn. Yeah, always been more of a copywriting guy. I'm trying to get more into the photo and video, the Instagram, TikToks, but I like writing. I like talking and sharing. About both my journey, tips and tricks, everything I'm seeing in real time. So yeah, I just started writing 2 years ago, and 30,000 followers later, built a following on social. So yeah, I just try to write about short-term rentals every day and share what I'm seeing on this journey in real time, good, bad, or indifferent. So yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, X, that's primarily where I hang out.
Yeah. I mean, I found you on LinkedIn, and I found the content was relevant, for right now and changing every day, but also straightforward. It seemed like LinkedIn's becoming this kind of like weird space where now there's so many ghostwriters. It's very hard to, well, I think it's easy to figure out, but other people think it's hard. 5 emojis, all the paragraph, spacing. But no, I really feel like it's relatable also. So I think your brand new person can get a lot of information from your posts that I've read on LinkedIn, but also very very upgraded for people who are in the middle of it, who can get like a twist on an idea, which hopefully they've gotten from this podcast, which is, hey, okay, I have 5, but those 2 tips are what's going to help me upgrade, because now I think anyone who's involved in STR, you can't be complacent. Like we were saying about dynamic pricing, being a dynamic owner, you have to always be thinking like, what are you going to do? Because somebody else is going to come in, hire Bridget Whitney, and then they're going to have a better interior than you. So you need to be on it and figure out all the time. And also, would you say that weighing the feedback of guests, even for me 20 years ago, has always been the thing that helped me curate my profile and everything online to make sure that you don't just discount everybody's feedback, even if they're a little bit crazy. A lot of the feedback is relevant and it tells you what you need to do to upgrade your listing. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to, it's ever evolving and ever moving, and you have to stay up with it.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the time. Glad we got you on the show. And I hope people check out your content on LinkedIn and X, formerly Twitter.
Thank you. I appreciate the time today. Absolutely enjoyed it.
All right. That was Taylor Jones of STR Search and Techvestor. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end, because now you know that I'm dropping episode previews so you can hear what's coming up next. And next week we have a show that's about mindset. We talk a lot about it, and it's because Matt King, the CEO of GoBundance, is my guest, but he also has a large background in real estate investing, and we talk about all the ways that real estate investors can get their mindset straight. This show is going to help you. I can't wait for you to hear it. See you next episode.